Hello, welcome to the January 13th, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and then we will go ahead and begin. Bear with me just for a second. All right, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I'm the host of the live stream. I work as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products in the United States. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the United States distributor, and I'll be the host of the live stream. I'm currently broadcasting from Alexandria, Virginia, which is outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States. And if you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can simply submit questions in the live chat field, or if you have a more complex question, you could send it via email, where you could just send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which level of Cubase you're running, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, so if it's version 12, version 11, 10, 10.5, and also which operating system that you're utilizing, that information will be helpful. My ability, especially in the beginning of the live stream, to answer questions in real time will soon be eclipsed. I will try my best throughout the live stream to catch up. But if you don't see an immediate response to a question, please, if we could try to refrain from asking the same question repeatedly, that just kind of slows down the process, that would be appreciated. If you wanted to, several hours after the live stream tonight, I'll go back and rewatch the live stream after a quick dinner break, and I'll do an index of all the topics discussed in today's live stream with timestamps that will be pinned to the top of the comments field. You could also go to, if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered, I think we're at over 23,000 topics that we've done in the live stream series here. You could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site. We also have two people that serve as moderators, Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community. We want to give a special thanks to them. Also, another wonderful resource of information that's pertinent and relevant to the Steinberg community is the Cubase Nation Discord, and Jazz Dude does a lot of work with that. So we'll give special thanks for that. And if you're looking for answers not on a live stream, that's a great resource to use. So, all right. So we had a question. I see it didn't, when I popped out my chat, it didn't carry over, but so the first question that I saw was, is there a way to change the different fade types using a controller keyboard? So let's see if I come here and I wanted to switch between my different fade types. So if I wanted to come over here, let me take a look. I don't think that there's a way of doing it where we could adjust a curve shape for our fade. But let me just take a look and see if it shows up under curve shape. Excuse me. And I think if we get a fade, it's not going to show up there. Yeah, so I don't think that there's a way of specifying the different curve shapes through a keyboard shortcut. So sorry about that. All right, another question. Hi, Greg. Is there an option for the chord quality major/minor in the attribute inspector? So I'm not sure. Let's say if we come, so let's say if I wanted to go, so I'm not sure if this is in the chord track or maybe in an editor, but let's say if I select a chord, we could set the root here. We could come over and, where you want it to be major, minor, sus4, sus2, diminished, augmented. You could set your different chords, chord type directly there. If it's within a score editor, and maybe if you could specify, so let's say if we go to the score editor and we go to add a chord here, when we just kind of select the chord symbol, and then we could see chord type, and then we could see our different chords labeled directly there. If we're in, let's say, our full screen editor and we go to our global track and we see a chord track, then this would kind of work the same way when we double click, where we could see our different attributes. So let me know exactly what if I missed the area where the attribute inspector is, but it seems like, in the score editor or within a chord track, it's pretty easy to do. And we'll just do the chord pads as well. So if we just, if it's for a chord pad, we could just click on the left column and then you could switch the type of chord between major, minor, diminished, etc. So let me know if it was a different area that you're looking at. All right, so Jan, I just see you mentioned your clarification. So I did get the email. Thanks for that. All right, so we see Filter Freak on. We have Stefan from Sweden. We have Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. We have Patrick Becker. Thanks for joining. Alexander Plasko. Dallas LaRue. Okay, so you just see question from Dallas LaRue. My PC seems to be slowing down when loading Cubase. Do you know any way of speeding up your computer up, like clearing the cache? So, it's hard to, make sure, see if it's with every program or if it's with, particular projects that are doing it. And if you could let us know how much memory you have. So it could be like, if your computer is, if you have a lot of sampled instruments and your computer is kind of on the edge memory-wise, that could make it run slower. But there's a number of variables that could be a factor there. So, but let me know if it's slowing down with an empty project or slows down more with the project with lots of data and virtual instruments and stuff like that. Wonderful to see Jean-Marie Horvat on. We have Lawrence Koch on. All right, so we see, hi Greg, in Hallian's Symphonic Orchestra, string instruments are signified with A or B, violins 2A, combi, violins 1A, combi. What's the significance? So often you'll have especially with violin 1, so if we go to add an instrument track, I'll just get to new project here. So say when we go to add an instrument track, a lot of times you might want to have a different string sound for like violin 1 and violin 2. So often they will have, so while we don't necessarily want to have the same exact textures, so when we go to our HSO, so we'll see, woodblock AB. These are just variations so that when you go to layer, let's say violin 2A combi. So when we go to play this, and let's say if we load a different track, and we'll just say, okay, let's go over here. So we'll say violin 2B combi. So these are just like subtle variations, maybe different instruments. So let's say if we put this onto channel 1. So this way we're not kind of layering. You know, they're pretty similar, but they will be different sample sets, often different instruments, so that they could blend together and be more realistic, so that you're not layering the same sounds on top of each other. So it just gives you kind of a variation in sounds to make it more authentic to a real orchestral experience. All right, hang on just a second. Let me wait. Okay, so we have a question from Patrick. Greg, I have arpeggiated Midi notes inside Key Editor. I want to select all the Midi notes of the arpeggio. Show how to select the middle notes on Key Editor with the Midi logical editor. Okay, so let's say I will come over here. I'll just add a quick instrument track. Okay, and okay, so let's say I have just like a quick synth bass. I'm gonna go to my Midi inserts, and let's go to the Apache. Okay, so I'm just going to come over here and I'll record in. Okay, so let's say we want it to, so we have an arpeggio, and let's go ahead and look at the data here. So let's say, okay, I wanted to come over here and select, so one of the things you could obviously do is just kind of visually look at it and just hold down shift and double click. But you could also do stuff like, okay, I want it to, let's go to our Midi logical editor, and let's go to setup, and let's say we want to select like the third within a chord. So we'll say we're going to select as our function, and we'll say we're going to select notes, and we're going to say context variable, and let's do context variable, and I'm going to put an or. So we're going to say is equal to if we wanted to come over here, so okay, so let's say if we want to do position and chord, so let me go ahead and just remove this, and then we could say the minor third, and let's go ahead and context variable equal to position and chord, and we'll do part, and we'll say major third. So let's see if this will automatically direct, so it's not an actual, but let's say if I if I'm doing this with a chord track, all right, right, so say if I came here, I will like that. All right, just start this from scratch again. Okay, so I'm going to, let's go add a chord track. All right, and on this, we will take our, we'll add the arpeggiator. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll drag this part to the chord track. All right, so we have our chords here. So now let's go to the logical editor. We'll double click so we can see all of our notes. And let's go to the logical editor and go to setup. So we'll say, again, we're going to select notes. And we'll say context variables equal to, and then we could say within position in chord track. So we could say, okay, I want it to be the minor third. And we'll insert, and let's say we want to do it for a major third, depending on the chord we played. If we played major, minor, diminished, augmented chords. Now that we have the chord track, then that will select the thirds or like middle notes. So if you have to do it by different intervals, you could do it just by doing the thirds like that. So let me know if that helps, Patrick. So again, just to show the logical editor preset, we'll come over here, select event, and we have the chord track, which we derived from the particular event. Context variables equal to position in a chord track, and then you could select whatever interval you want based on the chord track that was derived from the played in part. All right, so we have Arif checking in from Holland. Thanks for joining us. We have Ali from Vienna, Mark Winslow from Hawaii. All right, PL Recording from India, Mizoram. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Soren from Sweden, who has his new album out, E Street Blue album. So congratulations on your release. I wish you all the success with it. It's a lot of effort to get a record done, so congratulations. All right, so we have a question from Valley. When I record the Spitfire BBC orchestra, the modulation always goes to 0 even when set otherwise in the preset or the Midi keyboard. Maybe there's a setting. Okay. So it could be the only thing that I'm not sure if you see that with all instruments, but one thing to check is if you go to under editing, let's look under Midi. There might be like reset on stop or never reset chased controllers. So you could choose to chase events. So I would look under the Midi preferences, under maybe reset on stop or never reset continuous chase controllers, and see if that makes a difference. Or also, in the chase events section right there, see if one of those things, it might be that the instrument itself is kind of doing that on reset. So, all right, so a question from Ed Rugman. Hi, Greg. I'm having issues with Contact 5 instrument tracks. Once disabled, if they're reactivated a while later, perhaps after shutting Cubase, they don't make a sound. MIDI input doesn't work. So I don't use Contact much personally. I have it on my personal computer. But, generally, whenever just, disabling tracks, that will kind of wake the instrument up. So let me know if you run into that with other instruments or just with Contact 5, if that's just the only instrument that you run into that, Ed. But it could be maybe that it's, just not waking up, or if you're running it locally or on something like a VE Pro, that could have an impact as well if it's running on like a hosted application. So we see a question from Mike Rivera. Hello, Greg. I have a question. I noticed that others program drums differently. There's a totally different view as they are programming drums. Can you show me how to get that? So if you were just kind of like how I would program drums, there's probably two main ways. So if I was to add an instrument track, so let's say we'll come over to Groove Agent SE. All right, so we'll just load up this kit here. So one way would be to just, kind of create an empty part, an empty event. And if we select a track, I'm going to just automatically, if you have Groove Agent SE, you could just create drum maps from the instrument itself. Now, when you double click, this will take you into a dedicated drum editor. So if we say, okay, I just want to do like one bar of a loop here, I'll activate just the loop. And then we could see all of our drum sounds kind of labeled here. So let's say, okay, I want to start with my kick. And we could just kind of audition, say, okay, I want my kick on 1 and 3, and maybe a snare and a clap. Let's say, okay, I want to move these over. So now we could just kind of drop in. And let's say, okay, I just want to paint in some hi-hats. So now if we want to adjust velocities, and then if you wanted to just and let's say, okay, I want to put it in triangle, but I want this to be in quarter note triplets as we So that could be one way of creating kind of a drum beat. Another way that people will use is a Midi plugin. So we get a Midi inserts, and there's one called Beat Designer. So what you could do with this, and I'll go ahead and mute what we just created. So with the Beat Designer plugin, here we could just, and we can make this a little larger, and this is kind of a dedicated. So I'll just come over here. Let's say, okay, I want this to be my kick. And let's say, okay, now, and we could have kind of multiple sounds. So you say, okay, I want to clap. So at this point, you could just kind of add different percussion elements. So this is another way of kind of using just kind of a dedicated kind of. And if you wanted to adjust the velocity of particular notes. So, and then if you wanted to, you know, drag this, I could say, okay, my cursor is at measure 3, you know, I could, or if I wanted to take that pattern from Groove Agent, I could just say, okay, let's come over here and we could insert the pattern at the cursor position and automatically kind of copy that over. And now we could just kind of have this pattern kind of play. So if I wanted to just, so those are two different ways, kind of using the dedicated drum editor or using the Beat Designer plugin. So let me know if that's kind of what you saw. All right, so we have Rob from Tarpon Springs, Florida. All right, and he asks, I frequently have to push the F key to find my place in the edit window. Is there a setting I'm missing for the scroll line to not disappear? All right, so let's say if I'm here, and let's say if I'm in my editor, so you know, generally I've always found it to kind of stick. So let's say if I'm zoomed in here, you know, and let's say we're just kind of playing this. So let's say, so now if I kind of jump back out, let's go to this part again. So, and it could also be contingent. So check this little setting here. So if you click on the little F drop down button, there's a suspend auto scroll when editing. So now if I do this and let's take off my loop, I double click, and we go into our large editor. So check that particular setting to see if you know, auto scroll when editing is turned on, and try unchecking that right there. All right, so we see this would be a media bay. So I guess it's the attribute inspector for the chord. So let's see if we could come over to Media Bay and look at the attributes inspector there. Okay, so I will come over here. Let's go to, thank you for the clarification. So let's say our key. Yeah, so it seems like it's just going to be like the pitch and not the actual. So I'm not sure if this is like considered like the key signature or the musical key that it's based around, because a lot of loops don't necessarily have. But let's see if we come over here if there's a key signature that is a field. So again, we'll just come over here and click on the settings cogwheel. Maybe under musical. So, but what you could do is come over here. Let's see if we could have this set. So let's say if we come over here and let's plus and say we wanted to add text, we could do display name to key signature. And now we could, let's just jump back here to our key signature. And here we could say C major if you wanted to. So you could create your own attributes. Again, kind of click on the settings and then click on the plus sign. And then if you needed to see that particular attribute in the media bay, you could create your own with that. So, but I think most of the intention of most samples don't really differentiate between major and minor. And it's just kind of like for kind of like the tonal center of the particular audio file. But thank you for the clarification. All right, so we see Greg, show us how to replace duplicate samples only for selected track. Okay. Okay, so let's say we have a scenario where I have the same sample that's on different tracks. So let's say we listen to this. So we're going to have and let's say we wanted to replace this particular sample. So what a lot of people would do is come over here and say, okay, I wanted to have, to take a different sample. And, if I come over here, hold down like the Alt or the Shift key and drag it over, I'll get prompted, do you want to modify all events that refer to the same material? So if we say all, it would do it on any time that particular track, that file is used regardless of track. So there isn't necessarily a way to to specify only for particular tracks. But what you can do is come over here, select the first event, go to audio, bounce selection, choose to replace the events, come over here, and now when I drag this over to all of my events that referred to the new piece, so since it's a separate audio file, hold down Shift now, and it says, do you want to modify all events that refer to that material? And since this is a copy of, it's a different audio file, we'll see that won't affect the other samples. So there's no way to, it's a great feature that you're able to do it, but if you're using the same samples across different tracks, you might have to just simply bounce this selection or render it to create a separate unique audio file that's a different name before you could replace it onto a single individual track. Okay. Okay, so we have Vali's question. How do I get the overview window in the upper section? With some projects it's there and some not. So all you have to do is go to your little setup window, your setup windows, and then if you wanted to see the overview, you could just enable it directly there. So sometimes, like when you see different events, but so at this point you could just choose what exact components that you want to see and have visible. Again, just this little icon right here, which is the window setup. And then you could pick and choose, like, I don't want to see transport bar or the lower zone. So you can kind of pick and choose what elements are visible directly there. Okay. All right. Wonderful to see Benny from Sweden on. Glad you can make it. All right. So we see from Ed Rugman, question, getting a huge stuttering project with the ASIO Guard maxed out at a buffer size of set to 1024, about 20 audio tracks and 20 plugins. Is ASIO Guard causing dropouts? Why would there be less clicking at 512? So, it's, it seems, so when you see the ASIO Guard meter, so we go to like your audio performance meter, so what the ASIO Guard is actually showing you is, let's say if I come to this particular plugin, this track, and we have a number of inserts. So I'll come over here, just add some heavy inserts. So let's say, okay, we'll come over here to multi-tap delay. All right, so when, we see our ASIO Guard performance increase, if we don't have this track record enabled, it's basically indicating that the ASIO Guard is, for the tracks that are record enabled. So, what you see is kind of as we, enable tracks for record, then those particular tracks, or when the track is selected, that's when we could see the ASIO Guard kind of increase. But if you're, seeing, but let us know also if you're hosting, because sometimes if you have tracks that are on a VE Pro, I don't think VE Pro gets along well with ASIO Guard. But if you could let us know if everything is local or if you're hosting some elements remotely or through VE Pro, that would be helpful. Okay, my chat field just jumped. Let me just find my place. All right, we see Jean-Marie Horvat just looking for anyone that's running a Mac Studio yet. So I'm just running an M1 MacBook Pro. That's what I'm running on currently now. All right, so we see from Jovanovic 3D. Hi, Greg. Any news on Halligan 7 and Absolute 6? Was hoping to release this month, but nothing. How soon is soon? I can't really, unfortunately, I can't really share product release information until it's publicly announced, but they are working on it. So, and I wish I could give more information, but I'm under non-disclosure agreement. All right. So we see from Noah Byrne, can you please let me know if you can answer my question that I sent you through email? I can write it again if you want. I've written in I've written it in here, but it seems to be deleted. Thank you. So if you want to give me a hint as to what the, sometimes if it's you might have too many characters, but I do have all the emails, and we'll get to those towards the end of the live stream. But if you see this message, but if you see this message, go ahead and just say, oh, I know that there was one about like folders, maintaining folder tracks, or, if you could just give me a hint, then I could probably go over it before the end of the live stream. All right, so we see Bruce just checking in from Simi Valley, California. I'm glad you could join us. All right, we have Johan joining from South Africa. Thanks for being on the live stream. I see Noah just mentioned, he says he wrote it at the beginning of the chat, but now I can't see it. So if it was the question about sometimes if you enter in questions like, an hour or so before or half hour before the live stream starts, they disappear. But if it was about the, selecting different like fade curves, we did cover that at the beginning, and I don't know of a way to do that. But let me know if, but just let me know what your question was, and we can see if we get to it earlier. All right, Mark Holland asks, using Cubase 12 Pro, what causes the playhead to stutter while in playback? Is this normal? The sound is coming out perfectly, I'm making sure I'm not causing it. Intel i7 core, 64 gigs of RAM. So a lot of times if you have something like that that's, a display issue, that's often kind of related to perhaps a video card driver. So that's where I would look. Unless it really bothers you, you could go down a nice rabbit hole of trying to, get your video display driver configured. But if it's playing back fine, that could... but those are usually related to kind of video card drivers. So we see from question, if you would build a perfect template for yourself, what would you include? Set of effects, how many reverbs, delays, which ones are your favorites, groups, etc., mixes into final stereo mix. Okay. So, for me, it's different. I don't, like if I was a composer, I would have all of my go-to instruments that I painstakingly have configured. But if I was doing, and then I would have, them grouped, I would have them named. But I wouldn't, but if I was doing like rock bands or, I would maybe have my drum set up with parallel bus compression, my bass, my guitars with my favorite plugins, like a number of tracks for, if we're doing gang background vocals, stuff like that you'd be able to have access to it. So, I think templates are, can be incredibly personal. I don't work with a template, but I'm not a composer that is, I just kind of, my use of Cubase is primarily like I'll record my bass for some projects, but I'm not a composer that has a very strict deadline who lives and dies by their template. But, just making sure that if you find yourself like loading something every time you do a project, include that in a template. So, or if you want to have access to these very, like you painstakingly went through and found like, this is the reverb for the snare I want. This is my default reverb for a vocal. This is my default chain. Then I would save that. So if you have to, load stuff into, a project and you find yourself loading that element in consistently, then I would include that in a template. All right. Okay, so we see Noah's question. and he just says, thank you so much for your knowledge. I'm learning from you. The first question is it possible for the project logical editor to show only certain groups of instruments? Okay, so let me jump back. Okay, so we have this project here. And let's say I have, let me just, so let's say I have like an orchestral project here, and we want to, so let's say I have different folders. Let's say I have one folder for everything, and let's say within my particular layout here I have a winds folder, and let's say this winds folder, there's a flute folder, and the flute folder, so we have a nested folder. And I think the question was how to automatically, say I just want to see only the winds. I want to see only the brass. I want to see only the string section, and how to do that. So I have my everything kind of set up in folders here. So I have a winds folder. I have my brass folder where I have 2 French horn parts. I have my strings folder. So what I could do is come over here and let's go to our project logical editor. So what I want to do is maybe hit a button and only see my strings, or only see flutes, or only see brass and nothing else, and hit another button and see, I want to see just, the woodwinds. So we'll come over here to our logical editor and I save these as presets. So let's say I want to show the winds folder. Now the first thing I did for each of these presets is I chose channel and track visibility show all before even doing anything. So this is a pre-command so that everything will be visible, because if we're in a scenario where we're only have our winds and we say, okay, now I want to see my brass. If we don't have this precondition set up, if there's no brass that are visible and all those tracks are hidden, then it won't show anything because there's nothing visible to choose from. So here I said, okay, we want to make sure that before we start this process that we're going to show all of our tracks. And then I said, let's find a container type is equal to a folder track. And we're going to say select. And then under name, I said name contains winds. And then for our post process, what I've done is under channel and track visibility is to show selected. So I have all these different tracks, and I'll open up more folder tracks here. So let's say, okay, we got a number, 20 some tracks, and obviously this isn't really contingent on how many tracks you have. So now when I do this, I'm only going to show the different elements. Everything's going to be hidden that's not in my winds folder. So I'll come over here, hit apply, and we just make sure I had that set up right. All right, so I'm going to just make sure we have this set up right. So let's see. Okay, and I'm going to add another condition. All right, so I think that now that we do this. Okay, so I'm going to add another condition here. On folders. Let's just see if I can find this. Okay, so let's say I have my folders open now. So I'm going to say under channel and visibility. Okay, so now I have this folder open. We're going to just say, now I only see my winds. So now we're going to say channel, track, visibility, show all. And let's say I want to see my strings. So I'll go to this preset. So right now, if I chose to show strings without opening everything, nothing would happen because there's no strings that are currently active. So this is why we do the channel and track visibility settings, and we want to show everything within strings. And I'll come over here, hit this preset, and now it's only my strings. And if we wanted to do this for brass, I could come over here and just show my brass settings as well. So, and I think if we want to go to project, let me just add this track folding that we should be able to. We'll say unfold tracks. So I come over here and let's just say, so now I have this set up in this particular preset. We'll come over here and say, okay, we have all tracks. And let's say, I think if I have my track within a template, that now I want to see only the brass, that we could just simply do it just like that. So let's say, again, if I wanted to, once you have your folder tracks named, so probably say channel and track visibility, show all project and unfold tracks. So in case they're folded, to select tracks that are, we want to select a folder track by name and come over here and hide everything else. So there's my winds. And if we just come over here, brass, that we could easily just kind of find everything that we want to, just like that. So again, for preconditions, channel and track visibility, show all. Project folding, unfold tracks. You want to say container type is equal to folder track, and the name contains brass, percussion, synths, whatever. And then that will automatically, if we have like a nested folder within that. So if I come over here, we'll say, let's go to winds, that even the nested folders within that particular folder will show up for you automatically. So give that a try. Let me know if that's helpful, Noah. All right. All right, so we have Uno Memento checking in from Finland, whose flight was late. We're glad you could join us. All right, so we have a question from Valley. Even if I don't select or enable the chord track, it records when I record MIDI. The MIDI keyboard is not routed there, but it picks it up, of course. All right, so let's give it a shot. All right, so we'll add an instrument track. Let's add a chord track. Sorry, just turn my phone volume down. Okay, so let's say if we're here, so I think if we just turn off, right, so let's see if we record in. So now if I record enable on the chord track, then it shows up, but if I just turn that off, so it could be that maybe you hit record enable after or during the recording process, or you have it set to automatically, like selected tracks will be record enabled, but it looks like just recording. So if we want to undo that, if I only have, and let's go ahead and put it in record. So with the chord track that's not recorded, but if I armed the track during record, that it will still buffer. So make sure that it's not record enabled. So but it seems like it's kind of behaving as expected, how I think it would. So, but let me know if yours behaves differently. All right, so we see Noah just asked, is it possible to write a long question more than 200 words? So yeah, that's why we have, if you have something that's more involved, then you could send it either in multiple messages here, or send it as an email in advance. So. All right, so in Noah's second question, is it possible to import/export color tracks from Cubase to VE Pro and vice versa? So I don't think that the two are compatible with that. So I think they're going to be different colored tracks. The color settings I don't think are going to be integrated at all because they're two separate programs, two different development teams. All right, wonderful to see Nick on. All right, so we see a question from Patrick. Thank you, Greg. Helped on the Midi logical editor. What's the use of channel type in last event? I have no idea how to use that, Greg. So let's say, all right, so we have some Midi notes here. So let's say some of these are on different channels. So now I wanted to switch these from channel 1 to channel 2. So within this part, some notes are MIDI channel 1, some are MIDI channel 2. So within the MIDI logical editor, I could say we want to select notes, or you could just say channel equals 2. So at this point, anything that's on MIDI channel 2, I could just hit apply and it will select all of those particular notes. So type, so let's say if we come over here to type, so what type of message is equal to note controller? So let's say I have, when we look at this, I wanted to, let's go to modulation. And let's say I have pitch bend. So these are different types of MIDI messages. So some of these are program changes. Some will be MIDI system common messages. So let's say we want to do program change. So now we can say I wanted to select the type is equal to program change. So I can now just come over here, select all the program change, or if I wanted to select standard MIDI files, or I wanted to select pitch bend, I could just come directly over here and select different types of MIDI messages. So you have MIDI messages such as continuous controllers, notes, standard MIDI files, pitch bend, poly pressure, program change, which are, people often think of them as continuous controllers, but are actually technically system common messages in MIDI. Now, when we go to last event, this allows us to say, okay, I wanted to select notes that were equal to, particular ones, or we could say, usually we could use this for like every other note. So I wanted to select every other note, and if I put 2, that would select every second note in our MIDI message. So that's what that kind of intention is. So those are just kind of different types of MIDI messages that have kind of been part of the MIDI language for years and years. All right. So we have a question, from Ed Pacheco. So thanks for joining us. Hi, in between 1 and 2 frames, how do you get the selector to select between 1.2, 1.3, and so forth and make adjustments on that spot? I do wave downloads, and sometimes I need to make adjustments. Okay, so if we have... Okay, so when we look at our snap, so right now our snap, once it's enabled, we could, and let me just reread this. How do you get this selector bar to select one? So, once we are here, all right, so if we turn off our snap, so let's say that we come over here, we'll just say, okay, I want this to be my grid to use to quantize. So if we wanted to kind of like nudge, nudge our playhead position, or if we wanted to nudge the events, we could just kind of come over here. We could say use quantize. And now if I wanted to go down to 1/128th of a note, or if our master time is set to, let's say, time code, at this point, we could select, moving it by a single frame. So as we do this, we can move by a single frame of time code, or subframe, a quarter frame, half frame. So once we kind of come over here, we could, have the grid adjusted, and we could go down to, our sample level. So if we go to samples, we could say, okay, I wanted to move this frame over by 1 sample at a time. So we could just ever so slightly adjust the position of events. So if you need to get into more detail control, you can just kind of switch your master timeline. And when you go to nudging, you can have an entire nudge palette. So if we enable nudging, you could come over, and as we do this, we could have the nudge be actually independent of the particular, so once we come over here, then the nudge rate you can set to be just independent of the master time frame. So if we come over here to say bars and beats, so that way you could actually have, like, if we go to your nudge, like I say, I always want to nudge in 10 milliseconds, but my master time is set to bars and beats. So we'll say, let's go to seconds. And then we could say 10 milliseconds. And now I could just nudge events based on 10 milliseconds, even if I'm in bars and beats. So let me know if that's what you're wanting to find out. But yeah, you could go down to a single sample for the accuracy. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. If you learned something, make sure you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. It's always helpful and allows us to continue to offer this. All right, wonderful to see Westar on. All right. So we see just a question from Patrick. Says, we used a chord track and select the notes, but based on chords. But what if it's not based on chords? Like if I arpeggiated C, D, E. So technically that could be a C ninth chord or C, A, F, and that could be a that's a chord as well. So if you want to select all the middle notes. But you could probably just come over here and let's say if we had arpeggiated notes. All right, I'll just... All right, so say we go C. All right, I know it sounds ridiculous, but let me just go ahead and... All right, so if you're... and let me just go ahead and just create the arpeggios from this. All right, so, let's say I have... So say if I select like this particular chord, you could go into, and this could be one of those things that it's probably faster to do manually than use the Midi logical editor. But let's say, okay, we want to select Midi notes. And you could also just say where, the note value 1 is equal to, D3. So let's say if I wanted to come here, we could select all D3 notes. We could select, but, if it's arpeggiated like this, you could still select, based on the actual pitch if you wanted to. So, and if you say, okay, on the next one, I wanted to select, all, F3 notes, all, but it's probably also just as easy to come over here and just say, okay, I want to select those notes and these notes and those notes, just looking at it visually may be faster. You could create a project logical editor, but if it's not really like based on chords, you might be faster just to manually select it, I think. All right, wonderful to see Harry Olive on. All right, and John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is sunny 24 degrees. All right, we have Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for being with us today. All right, we have Razel from Denmark. All right. All right, so we see from Grant Nicholas, anyone have experience with Cubase freezing when loading / closing a project, disabling Ethernet connection unfreezes? Any help is welcome. Check to see if, it could be, if you're on the Windows platform, which I think you are, Grant, check out, you could get the Resplendence, has a utility called Latency Mon, and see if you disable your Ethernet connection, if that's causing problems. I don't know if you're running any Ethernet-based audio solutions like a Dante virtual sound card or anything like that, but that could, but see, network drivers have been culprits in different scenarios for interrupting different, real-time audio processes. And I know that you may be using it for VST Connect sessions as well. All right, so we see why Groove Agent 5 can't save the custom kit with the project. Is that a difficult thing to do for Steinberg? All right, so let's do a test. All right, so I'll just add. Okay, so I'm going to drag these out. Put our custom samples on different tracks. Okay, let's just. Make sure I can find this. All right, so I'm just going to right click here, and then I'm going to save the kit. Okay, and now I will save. So it looks like everything was saved here. Sorry, that's an annoying sample. All right. But yeah, so make sure that, if you do that, that when you go to your Groove agent, that you actually, make sure that you actually save the kit. But let me know if I did anything differently than you. But it looks like the custom kit I just created was saved with the project without any unexpected hassles. All right, we see YouTube is eating Nick's post, but he did whack the like button, so that's good. All right, so we have Ramona's Diaper checking in from Southeast Michigan. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see Michael Pierce has joined. My chat field just jumped. Okay, so I think I'm back to where it was. All right, sorry about that. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. Is it possible to have a key command to go to the start of the first track or folder in your project? All right, so let's say, I think I have a project that might. All right, so we want to see, it might be the home key that takes you to the top. But say I have like multiple songs, multiple tracks within a single project here. All right, I'll just go ahead and unfold. All right, so let's say I'm here, my project cursor. So I think if I hit the home key, that takes you, let me just select this, and the home key takes you to the top, and then the period key on the numeric keypad will take you to the beginning. So let me just see if I have like an audio track at the top here. So hit the period key on the numeric keypad to go to the beginning, and the home key, I think, will take you to the top of the very first track. Let me just see if I could confirm that. So that will navigate you to the top. Just try maybe if it's... We'll try without a folder tracks. Yeah, so if you hit the home key, that will take you to the top. And then the period key on the numeric keypad will take you to the bottom. So if you wanted to make a macro, I'll just come here. If you want to do both those together. And I will hit the home key, select, add, and then hit the period key on the numeric keypad. Just transport, go to project start, add. So let's say if I'm here, I have this event selected, that track selected, my cursor is over here. I will now come over here to the macro, CCLS, let's say to top and start. And so maybe I have to select none. Let's see if that, but try hitting the home key. It'll take you to the top and the period key to the bottom. And let me see if that, if I come over here, if that changes the home key behavior. So yeah, so it could be also if we wanted to do this in a macro, we'll come over to key commands and we will choose edit. And there's a select none, I think. All right, so we have select none and then navigate top and at that I did the same command twice. So let me just, great, so let's just try this. So say I have that selected and we will come over to top and bottom, boom. So you can make a macro to do it, but again, just the period key on the numeric keypad will take you to the beginning of the project, and the home key, and it might be a different key on Windows, but that will take you to the top. So try those two things, and you can make a macro just to show that. So again, come over here to top and bottom. So let me know if that's helpful. And you could assign a keyboard shortcut to that particular macro. Claudio was just mentioning those crazy NDAs. So yeah, I don't want a bunch of German colleagues mad at me. All right, so we have a question from Henry Fleury. Hi, Greg. When I import an audio from Media Bay and convert the audio file to 48K, the tempo is faster than my project tempo. So I'm not sure how you're doing it, but how I would tend to do. All right, so let's say if I have. You see what we have here. So let's say we have 44.1 files and I wanted to import see how, so I'm not sure how you're converting it, if you're converting the project. So how I tend to do my sample rate conversions is, I'll show it with this project. So you could probably just, right click and go to media. And if you come over, so let's say we listen to this. And if I select this file, and let's say I go to the pool window, so let's say track 2, and we say convert files, so I want to change the sample rate to 48K. And so now that I've created this, and if I replace this file, we will see that it's not going to work. So how I do my, once you come here, one of the options that you could do is if you go to Preferences and go to Editing to Audio, you could automatically convert to Project Settings on importing audio files. What I do with the multi-track projects is, let's say, we'll listen to this for context of pitch and time. So now, if I go to my project menu, to project setup, and I'll say let's change it to 48K. I'll hit OK, and I want to convert the sample rate. We're going to keep the original files, and I'm going to keep it at the same sample position. So now it's 48K, but it's playing at the same time and same pitch. So it could matter how you're actually working on the particular, how you do the sample rate conversion, but you should be able to, if you do it on, if you have the import preference set, you could do it like, that should work for you and automatically keep it kind of the same pitch. Or if you go to your project menu to project setup and change the sample rate there, then, you want to say yes, yes. And when it keeps the sample, it'll ask you the last question to keep the sample positions, choose no for that. And then you should be all set with that. So let me know how you did the sample rate conversion. That would be helpful. All right, so we see from Matt Lewis, hi Greg, sorry if it's already been asked. Could you show different uses of the arpeggiator? I've only used the one in Pad Shop. So let's say if we, there's different arpeggiators for different instruments. So if we wanted to do something like inside of, the one inside, there's kind of one that often works with when we have like a synth bass part or something like in Retrolog, or so let's say if I wanted to open up, this is Retrolog here. So I'm just playing a single voice. But then if I come to Retrolog here, we could just go to different arpeggios. So I could say, okay, so I play one note, and let's say I wanted to so I could just type in a number here. And if I wanted to change the velocity, so you're able to kind of do, and if we say, okay, I want it to come over here, instead of velocity, we could do different controllers if you wanted to. So if you say, okay, I want the tempo scale here, we could say, okay, I want this to be eighth note triplets. We could add more swing. And And then we could add different controllers directly here. Now, so you probably have a very similar controller, very similar kind of arpeggiator inside of Pad Shop, but, and also you could get into like, okay, I want to take this and I'll just bypass this, but, the MIDI plugins also do quite a bit. So if you come over to the MIDI inserts, you could say even just a simple, so I'm just holding a chord down. And I can say, okay, this is going up and down, or I want to go down, then up, or random. And we could say, okay, I want this to be, and let's say I want this to be over 2 octaves. So as I would just kind of play back and say, okay, let's do, and always try like dotted and triplet values just to kind of make things a little more interesting. And then if you get into like Apache SX, here you could actually even drag and drop different MIDI sequences over onto it and use that as the basis for an arpeggiator. So all sorts of great options that you have with different arpeggios that come with Cubase. You can see Grant Nicholas says Cubase arpeggios are great. Use them since in the Atari 1040 ST. All right. All right, so we have a question. If you produce, example, a rock track, go through all the ropes to the end in mixing, would you add mastering plugins in the final output of your file, or do you master as a rule in a separate file? I like to be able to, take my mix. So I may add a little bit of compression on my final mix, but, generally I like to preserve that. If I'm sending it off to mastering, I will let the mastering engineer kind of make the final kind of, making it louder part so that I don't kind of prohibit them from doing their magic to make something happen. So a lot of times, but, my general workflow is I would take my project. I wouldn't do too much master bus processing because I would take it into a program like Wavelab. And Wavelab is, like a purpose-built mastering tool. And it's, I see people spending, multiple hundreds of dollars getting all sorts of stuff, and it's just like, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of workflows, whereas this is kind of really a dedicated mastering tool so that you could, if you're doing like, a full, like, EP or album release, that you could work with these different elements, where you can say, okay, I just wanted to, okay, so as soon as we're here, we could just say, okay, I want to go to different projects that we have set up. So if we wanted to just kind of make a particular CD project, so let's say, here I could just say we want to, take all of, lay out our crossfades between tracks to make sure that we have, equal volume, that we have kind of tonal consistencies. So, this could be, so what I do with my projects that I'm mixing is I will always take it into Wavelab for mastering, and it's, a phenomenal tool for creating that cohesion. You could do a lot of processing in Cubase, and if you had to just think of mastering as processing, then that's one thing you could do it in Cubase. But when you think of mastering as kind of making, everything consistent tonally, everything consistent level-wise, then I would approach it from Wavelab to do that. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. Greg, is there specific settings like change color of interior track? Because if I select a sample and change color, only samples changing the track remains the same. I want a separate file. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, I mean, so it says, if I select a sample and change color, only samples changing the track remains the same. I want to keep my drums and shakers blue, etc. Okay, so I guess maybe it's change color of the entire track, because if I select a sample and change color, only samples. All right, so let's say if I have, okay, I'm just going to reread this, make sure. All right, so let's say if I have multiple parts that are different colors. Let me just create them here. So okay, so let's say these are all on different colors. All right, so say if I want to move these tracks to this track, that they will, so as we do this, we can assume the track color. So if we have, so if we wanted to change the color of all of the events on the track, we could select the track here and adjust the colors accordingly. And then we can see that as I click here, the colors are reflected on each of the events. But if I wanted to now come over and have different colors for different events, I could just activate the color tool. And then for that event, I could say, here I want, this to be more orange and this to be a different color. So you could select within the color tool to have, even though this track and what we see in the mix console, we could have different elements on that track in different colors. So, but if I wanted these to all be the same color, I could just come over here and, if we wanted to select, I think if we now select the track color, so we could have it overridden, or now that they're all selected, we could just say I want those all to change colors like so. So let me know if that's helpful, Patrick, what you're looking for. All right, so we have Major Void Studio asks, hi, great stuff. How do I double click a MIDI event so it opens in a new window? So all you have to do is go to Preferences, and then you'll see Editors. Double click opens Editor instead of Lower Zone, which is default, into a new window. So I hit Apply, and we'll come over here. Now I double click on this MIDI event, and it's in a separate new window. So if we go back, I want to go back to the Lower Zone. So again, Preferences to Editors, and opens in Lower Zone, hit Apply, hit OK, and now it opens in the Lower Zone window. All right, did you discuss earlier how to colorize the folders? So let's say I wanted to, let me just go to a different project where I have a bunch of tracks in folder. Okay, so now I have the folder selected here. So if I wanted all the tracks, so let's say now if I have all these selected, we could just choose to, so if I have no event selected, let's say I just have the tracks selected, and again, go to the color tool. We could come over here, and if we have the folder selected as well, at this point we could just say all the tracks in a folder will be selected. So, or you could have them be independent as well. All right, so we have a question. Can you explain the expression map? I'm always using one articulation on a track, but maybe you need to learn how to use the function. Thanks. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me find a project here. Okay, so when we have different instruments, and we see this a lot in orchestral instruments, that maybe, you know, instead of having just short violins, long violins, pizzicato, trills, that you'll have one sound that will basically play all of those different projects. So let's say we'll come over and let me just check. Let me just check my connections again. All right, so let me just see if I have. See if we get the project to wake up here. All right, so I'll just do it on new project here, just to show it. All right, so say I want to go to my cello. All right, so when I play my cello, I could come over, and if we wanted to have different articulations, like trills, so in a pizzicato, so let's say if I just played a quick melodic figure here. Okay, so now I wanted to switch between the different sounds. So what I could do is I'm going to double click here. We'll go to our expression map. So if we're inside of Hallion or Hallion Sonic, I could just import the key switches automatically. Otherwise, we may have to go to Midi and go to your expression map setup and, you know, actually build a expression map from scratch. So, but here, if it's a Hallion instrument, it's kind of automatically done. So if we are playing this back, what I want to do now, and we'll just show this, and I'll say, let's look at my articulations. So these are all the available articulations that are here for me to use. So instead of loading up different cello sounds on different tracks, I could come over and say, okay, I want to start with spiccato. So say, okay, maybe I want to start with legato and then switch to spiccato and then back to legato. And I want these two notes to be pizzicato tight and back to legato. So as we listen to this now, and let's say maybe I want this to be, instead of a trill, I want that to be my spiccato. So as we do this now, so say for the long note, I wanted to go back to legato. So this way we get more realistic performances. So this allows us to switch between the different articulations so we get a more realistic performance instead of having to have each of those different performance aspects loaded onto different tracks and then trying to merge those into one part that could be printed out later. Okay, John Costigan says he just remembered to hit the like button. Thank you, and it's stimulating for him, so that's good. We should all stimulate John Costigan. So we see from Noah, and this is about the Project Logical Editor. Says, thank you so much, although I forgot to mention I'm on Cubase 11 Pro. I'll try to find and create the precondition. Thank you. So I don't think the precondition is in Cubase 11 Pro. So I think it was one of the things that was added in Cubase 12 Pro. So, I think it was a great excuse to update. But yeah, I'm glad that worked out for you. But I think you can get that to work pretty easily. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. I'm glad that we would all have our virtual ice cream distribution begin. All right. We see Jazzy already has 1 gallon of French silk ice cream. Way to get started, Michael. Good going. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. How do you modulate the fine tune of a bass drum or any sample and groove agent with an LFO? The reason is to make each and every drum sound a slightly bit different. Okay, so let me come over. Okay, so let's say I want to take this particular patch. All right, so we don't have to send an LFO, but what you could do is just come over here. So let's say, I want to take maybe the hand clap here. So I want to take that. So I would just come over here to pitch, and then you could just random. that's really all you have to do. So if you want variety, just select the pad and come over to the pitch and just say random. And now you can hear the clap just every. And if you wanted to also just kind of have your envelope drawn in, you could. And so again, just come over here and set the random. And that way it's not playing the same thing every time, and you don't have to set up an LFO for it. And you just do it kind of built in directly to the plugin. So. Okay. All right, so I see from Luke LJ James. So I may not have seen the questions you're posting, but you could always, if you have something that's a detailed question, please feel free to. You could always email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, wonderful to see Chris Hallam from Athens, Georgia. All right, so just had an email from Fred Corey just pop in. I'll reach out to him after the live stream. See from Valley, once again, thank you, Greg. I don't know what I would do without you. So you'd probably still make great music, but you'll just hopefully get there a little faster watching the Club Cubase live streams. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we see from Nick, did you get a chance to chase up on the license? So I did send an email about it this morning, but didn't hear back. So hopefully early next week. Sorry about that. Imagine people are still kind of getting unburied from emails that they missed. All right, so we see from Antoine Van Kampen says, thanks for going to the home start keys, overlooked the home and period keys. So, all right, so we have a question from Brian Sawyer. Is there a way to import keyboard shortcuts from one version of Cubase to another? Had shortcuts in 11 that I lost in 12. So if you just open up 11, and it's really all you have to do is go to your profile manager, and you could export directly from there. You could, and I think you're on Windows, but if you wanted to also, if you go to, like, I have a screenshot here that I could show. Just find this real quick so you could find it quickly, but it is just a single little file that you can copy. This is it. So if you go to like your start menu and then go to where you see Cubase 11, you'll see a user settings data folder. In there, you'll see presets. So you could copy your key command preset. So you may want to save it in Cubase 11 and then just copy it into the same preset folder within your user settings data folder in Cubase 12. Or just simply export a profile from 11 and import that into 12, and that will carry over your key commands. All right. So we see Val Lee just says, question, Chat AI said, Cubase Pro has grain morphing function as a VST instrument. Where? So it's probably in Pad Shop. So if you come over to go to your instrument and go to Pad Shop, that you could do, I'm pretty sure I'm not a Pad Shop expert, but that you could do it here. Also, you may be able to find it in one of the included Hallian Sonic instruments. Let me just take a look. But it's probably going to be in Pad Shop would be the first place I would look. And also maybe in Flux. So here you could have kind of different granular symphonies, and you probably morph between the two directly in here as well. So if we just... So those would be the two places I would look for it. All right, so we have a question from Lauren McDonald. So the question is, anyone know how duplicating a track would link certain settings together? Changing a setting in one does the same in a duplicate. Sorry, I don't have a specific example. All right, so let's say I'm going to duplicate a track. So I'm not sure if it's Midi or audio. So let's say I'll duplicate this particular track. All right, so we have the duplicate. Now, if you wanted to, one thing that you could do is, and I'm not sure if it's like this, where you could say, okay, I want to, let's say if it's an audio part, I could come over here and we'll say events to part. And if I make a copy here, that when we do like in the sample editor, that if I wanted to take these different ones, that could be applied. Let me just do a shared copy. So now when I'm in the sample editor or MIDI editor, that I could make an edit to one that it's applied to others. If we do this for MIDI data, we could do so I could select an event here, and we could also just hit Control K, and we could create shared copies, so that if I come over to a MIDI event and make an edit on one, that we could have that same edit kind of applied to all of the files. So if I now wanted to come over here and change the pitch, that changing the pitch on one is automatically applied. So maybe that's what, if you're trying to get into shared copies, and if you could let me know if it's for MIDI or audio, that would be helpful. All right, so you see Valley saying regarding his BBC modulation question, yes, it was the reset and stop box that was ticked and caused that. Thanks again. So glad we were able to get it resolved for you. See Henry Fleury just says that worked. Thank you, Greg. You're welcome. All right, so we have from Harry Olive, says, good day, Greg. Question, I'd like to control a node in the FX modulator pitch shift with the CC MIDI controller. Can you show us how to, if possible? So I think we looked at this before, and I don't think it's possible to control the node. But I'll take a look at it again. I don't think it's, remote controllable. So let's say if we wanted to go over here to our FX modulator, and I think it was with the pitch shift. So, I think a lot of the intention of this is that we wanted, similar effects that were always going to, play back in time. So if we wanted to, have these, specific things, so the automation would be the actual envelope that's drawn in. But I don't know of a way to, take a particular node and have that automatically, controllable by a MIDI CC. So I think that the concept is that we would have kind of the static, the automation is derived from the node that you're doing. So, but let's see if I come over here and if I automate the parameter here. So I don't think... So let's say if we now, let's say we're going to start at measure 18 and automate a node. So I don't think it's able to be done, as we discussed in a previous live stream, but I'll mention it to the team that people are looking for that. All right, so we see Mike Rivera says, Greg, going back to my drum question, you were spot on. Thank you. You're the best. So you're welcome. Glad we got it sorted out. All right, wonderful to see Tiago from Brazil. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so we can see from a question, how can I do to only see the plugins between two markers or something? So I don't think it's really, if we have data on particular tracks. So let's say let's duplicate this track a couple times here. So it's not necessarily based on plugins, but let's say if I have 3 different tracks, what you can do, and let's say this is where my locators are, that we could choose to only see tracks that have data between the locators. And that would only show tracks, but not necessarily... if there's an insert plugin or something like that. But if you wanted to see where the data was, we could kind of choose to only, see tracks where that, or we could hide all tracks that don't have data between the left and right locators, but not necessarily. And that could be a plugin if it's an instrument track, but probably not like for an insert or send effect. See Gareth, wonderful to see you on. And Gareth is just saying that Wavelab is marvelous. So All right, wonderful to see Pablo on. We have the whole Hot Mess group online. Wonderful. Thanks for sending over the track. Pablo should have some bass on it over the weekend. And everyone's happy that Pablo's on. All right, so we have a question. Could you find a way in the score editor to add the title, subtitles, and any composer details once instead of doing it every time in all 8 different score parts when exporting, printing every part? Yeah, so I did. So thanks for re-asking. It was on my list of questions for later in the live stream. So let me just jump back. All right, so let's say we're here and we have a nice, lovely Schubert piece. And I want to be able to, when we go to the score editor, to have a title and put that in once, and it's in every single part. So right now I'm on the flute part. So we'll go to other, and instead of using text, we're going to use page text. So now I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to say, let's put it at the top. Let's make it center. I want to add, we'll say Schubert Symphony 5. I think it's in B flat. All right. So we could say, all right, so I want that at the top. I want to set my font to be 40 for that. And then let's say I want to put another page text over here. So we'll do top right, and we'll say I'm sure I have my dates wrong. All right, so now let's say I have this done. All right, so now when I go to another part, all I have to do is open up another part. So we go to our score editor. All of that will be preserved for us. So if I wanted to look at the violin part, again, come over here and we could just have that. So you want to go to other and then go to page text, and then that will be applied to all the different score parts that you print out. You do it once and then you don't have to worry about it. Thanks for asking again. See, comment from an entertainer. I really don't get how film composers don't get lost in their templates. It's their whole world. It's just, like often it's the one, that they're kind of working with one template and they know that intimately and have built it over time. And there's always a great search function. So you could come over here, just click here and say, oh, I want to go to oboe. And it'll just take you there. I need to go to horn. And then you could just go to particular tracks like that. So search function is also a great thing to have when working with large templates. See, apparently it was Gareth who shot the sheriff. So it's good to know. Now he's in exile in Spain. All right, so we see from Emma Abraham Mopal, hello, Greg. How can I quantize or fix the timings of the audio from live recorded drum tracks? Okay, so there's several different ways of doing this. So let's go ahead and let's say we wanted to do kind of like a quick overall, make everything quantized and tightened to the grid. So let me just go ahead. Okay, so let's say we're listening to our drums, and we'll put our click on. And we'll say every time there's going to be a drum fill, it'll be pretty typical that we will speed up a little bit. So it looks like we have a snare roll coming up. So that rushed a little bit. All right, so we're going to be picky about it. So what we could do is I'm going to find kind of the hit points of various, let me just get rid of this little view. I'm going to find the hit points. So we'll go into our sample editor and go to our hit points. So if we wanted to kind of overall quantize, and what we want to do is to make sure our hit points have enough threshold so we're not getting like snare tracks or other tracks bleeding into it. So I'm going to take the kick and let's say the snare. So this is hi-hat. So if we and we'll see if this is a snare here or tom. And let's say in this track, the hi-hat is pretty rhythmically significant. So we're going to double click here and just go to set our threshold to, again, mitigate the other tracks that are bleeding out. So we kind of found the hit points for key parts. What we want to do now is we're going to place this into group editing. So once we do this, I'm going to go to my quantize panel. So, and we'll go to the edit quantize settings. I'm going to select everything here. We're going to give a priority to our different drums. So say I want kick to have priority. I wanted my snare to have second priority. And let's say my hi-hat. And this is basically going to lay out the warp markers throughout the entire drum part. So once we've done that, so we'll just kind of create these. All right. And then at this point, we're going to choose our quantized value. We'll say 16th notes. And we could just quantize just like that. And then if we don't have this set to audio warp, I'll undo that step. So we'll quantize. Now, so we could just kind of do, our different priorities and just kind of do our quantizing like that. Now, also in version 12, we could take different, if you find it's just like one or two hits that are bad, we could place these into, just abort that. So let's say I want to, at this point, put this into my warp markers. So we could choose our warp tool and make sure that we're in free warp. And now that's going to take all of our different tracks here. And I can say, oh, all these drums were a little late. This hit was early, whatever you want to do. And you could just move the timing of all the drums together as a single entity. So that's a couple of different ways that you could quantize and fix different drum recordings. Thank you for the moderation, Jazz Dude. Appreciate it. We see Gareth has received 1 gallon of coconut cream ice cream from Mr. Teams. All right, so a question. Why does it often happen that the ASIO load in a project reaches the limit, while in a Windows Task Manager, the processor load is only 60 to 70%? Because the audio real-time performance is different than the computer's processing performance. Because, depending on your instrument, you may have one CPU core that's so overloaded that, the program can't keep up, and that's causing the program to work. So that may not show up, but on like your Windows, performance meters, like your CPU performance. So, but realize that, audio performance versus like the typical operating system performance meters are indicating and showing different things. So they're not analogous. So it's a bit of an apples and oranges situation. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. I see that Pablo's clapping now, so I have to watch it, see what I did to make Pablo clap. All right. So we have a question. Do I understand correctly? The longer the signal route, for example, several groups going into each other, the higher the probability of reaching the limit for one chord. So generally, it's not the signal route. What can often, it's not the signal route that's going to different groups, but often if you have one track with like 16 plugins, that it's only that one track is only going to be able to utilize one CPU core. So it's not necessarily, if you send it to a group track, to another group track, to another group track, that would be spread across the multiple CPU cores. But if all the processing is on one single track, or all of the processing is on, you have 16 instruments loaded into a particular virtual instrument, then that could take one CPU core. Some instruments like Hallian Sonic can utilize multiple cores, but a lot can't. All right, so we have a question. When you record live drums, would you use the track versions or lanes in order to choose the best takes in the end? I would probably utilize track versions because I think the track versions is a little easier to navigate between different takes, and it could, but depending on the situation where it's like, okay, everything was great except this one drum fill was really bad, but if you wanted to be able to instantly switch, say, oh, what does take 3 feel like, with, guitars and bass and keys on take 4? What does take 5? Being able to switch easily between all the different takes is easier with track versions. So I would probably, my rule of thumb is like for single parts, I tend to use lanes, like for vocals, guitar solos, comping individual parts. And when it's like a multi-track performance, I tend to lean towards track versions. But there are times when you could go back and forth either way with that. All right. All right, so we see from Brian Sawyer, Total Conus, Greg, have a new Razer TARDIS V2 and needed those shortcuts active. So, yeah. Valley's just saying, oh, wow, I forgot how powerful Pad Shop 2 is. Yeah, that's a lifetime of learning in that instrument. So watch Gary Gibbons' videos. He does a brilliant job. He's like a Pad Shop genius. So we see from Quellen, hello, Greg. Are there any way to record macros like in MS Excel? So I'm kind of an Excel idiot, but I don't think that it's like, okay, you can move the mouse here and do a particular thing. So it's really kind of chaining different keyboard shortcuts together. But, realize that you could you could incorporate Project Logical Editor or Midi Logical Editor presets within that. But I don't think, Excel has to do stuff in real time. And, so it's probably different. All right, so we see from Papa Beats, how do you solve a disk cache overload? So let me know if you're playing a lot of audio tracks, if you're playing a lot of, usually you don't kind of hear that. If you let us know if you're running an SSD drive or a solid state drive. And, the first thing I would do is come over and, make sure that, the first thing is make sure your buffer size is raised. And if you could let us know what audio interface and what computer setup stuff you have, Papa Beats, we might be able to dial it in and help you out a little bit. Wonderful to see Sable Winters on the live stream, and she's thumbs up number 99. Thank you for that, Sable. Okay, so we see from John Mastriccio, help customize chord pads, voicing style versus import MIDI loop notes. Okay, so if we have chord pads, let me just go to another project here quickly. Okay, so let's say we have, all right, so let's say if we go to a chord pad here, all right, so we'll enable it. So if we wanted to kind of customize, we could come over here, you could add different tensions and different voicings here. So let's say, and then I see, so that's how we could customize versus import MIDI loop notes. So, if you wanted to, instead of, having it laid out for you directly there, we could also just say, okay, let's get to, instead we could change our player mode to pattern. And then if we wanted to just drop a MIDI part in, now we could go to the chord pads and we could add the pattern. So that's going to play more of, different rhythmic aspects as opposed to, let's say, well, you do that. And if I wanted to change the chord, so we could do stuff like that. So let me know if that's kind of what you were looking to find out. All right, so we have someone checking in from Russia. Sorry, I can't read, I guess it's Cyrillic, the language. But thank you for joining us. Hope you're well. All right, so we see from Lauren McDonald says, thanks, actually the issues were shared copy automatically happening when I duplicated the track, except the parts in the duplicate track didn't look shared, ghosted. So, often how you can tell kind of a shared copy. So let's say if I come here, is if you look in the upper right hand corner, you'll see like almost like this little equal signs, and that will indicate that it's a shared copy. So it's not necessarily visually different or ghosted view, but just when we see this little almost equal sign, the two horizontal bars in the upper right hand corner, that would indicate that it's a shared copy. So look for that instead of like different shades or tints. Okay, we'll keep Gareth's secret, his place of residence, secret from the authorities. So, all right. So we have Cubase X just saying, "Hi Greg, thanks for these hangouts. They're fantastic. So I'm glad they're helpful for people." All right, so we see Gareth just says the pitch envelope in Groove Agent equals the revelation of the day. All sorts of great stuff you could do with that. So you see question, upgraded my Spectral Layers Pro from 8 to 9. I got a receipt email, but no activation code email. Are there more people with this problem? Made 2 days ago a ticket, but as of yet no response. So check in your My Steinberg account, and then it may be indicated in your My Steinberg account. So look there. All right, so you see a question, what files are associated with chord voicing style? So, any part, so if it's going to be like, if we're set to patterns, it's really just anything that comes from Cubase. You could just drag the event directly down and it will derive the chord voicing from that. So it's not necessarily, it would have to be kind of copied into Cubase. We can't necessarily save it as a loop. But let's see if we come over here to patterns. You could also do MIDI loops. So if we have this, and if we exported a MIDI loop, that we could import MIDI loops. So, and a MIDI loop is basically just a quick little area. So my whole computer is frozen. Let me just. All right, let me see. I have to plug my mouse in. Hang on a second. Bear with me just a second. So you do MIDI loops. Okay, sorry, my mouse battery was dying on me. So, just a standard MIDI loop, which you could get MIDI loops from MediaBay. So if you want to come over here and just go to loops and samples, there's a bunch of MIDI loops. Like if you go to the sequel content, and then you could, just come over here, import MIDI loop, and then use that as the basis for the chords as well. All right, wonderful to see Nick Saya on. Pablo says he's drinking a coffee. You can't do that in the middle of a live stream that has an hour and a half to go. Party foul for Pablo. I can't have my mocha. All right. All right, so we see from Nikki Zarin, do you have a bus route tutorial made? And if, can you redirect me, please? So I'm not sure if there's one. I mean, it's really simple to do. So let's say if we're here, I'll activate this and revert the project. So say I want to take a number of tracks and send it to a bus. You know, what we could do, I want to take all my drums. So say I have all my drums here. So I'm going to right click and we'll add track and we'll say group channel to selected channels. We'll make it a stereo group. Now everything is in my group. So if I wanted to apply processing on the drums in general, I come over here, let's get to my envelope shaper. And now if I wanted to even take that, let's add an audio track and I'll set its input from the bus. So we'll say from group 1 that we just created. And now I can come right over here and just record all of my drums and pass it in real time as my stereo out, right back in with all the processing. So now all you had to do is select all the tracks that you want to send to a group. And if you wanted to add a group track, we could do that and route it. You know, we could go to your tracks and route it to the group or via the outputs there, or just go to the sends and route to different groups there. So let me know if that's helpful or if you have any other group questions. All right, Benny from Sweden wants everyone to bang the like button, so that's good. And that has got him 1 gallon of pomegranate ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, so you see a question from Sable Winters. What are the portions of a track diagonal lines or grayed out? So often if you have like a diagonal line on a track like this, if it looks like this just means that there's 2 parts that are overlapping, and we could go to the bottom center and pick which track is actively played, but generally that just indicates that there's more than one audio event stacked on top of the track. So let me know if that's what you're looking for, Sable. Gareth just mentions chord pads is a great way to instantly play Lean on Me. So yeah. Yeah, so you see from Cubase X, it just says, what do you mean with my Steinberg account? I logged into Steinberg where I see my products, my profile, my support, etc. Is that what you meant? So yeah, that's what we call your my Steinberg account. So look in there. I think I'm catching up here. All right, so Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of Rocky Road ice cream. So I'll get my son will sneak and eat all the ice cream before he has dinner. So he likes to do that. All right, so I think I'm at the end of the questions there. Let's go ahead and go to some of the questions that were mailed in advance. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. You see that we're at 109 likes. Thank you very much. All right, so we had a number of questions that were sent in. All right, so we covered that one. All right, so last time we had a question about like kind of a clever thing to do in the score editor, and I was trying to figure out how to do kind of like a mirror function. So I was playing with that. So let me go ahead and show that. All right, so let's say I have just see if I can find just kind of interesting part here. So let's just say. Okay, so I'll just drag this over. All right, so let's say we have this wah-wah clavinet part, and we want this to, like we want to try out some different ideas with this. So let me just switch this to velocity only. Okay, so what we could do is kind of actually establish. So let's say I want to take all the notes above. I want to set kind of a mirror point here. So what I could do is we'll just say. So we're going to go to our Midi logical editor, and we'll go to setup. Okay, so we want to take. We're going to transform, and we'll say notes. And here we're going to say, all right, so I think it's a value 1, and we'll say mirror. So what I want to do is mirror around, so we'll say this is going to be A sharp 2. Okay, so now, I'm actually going to just kind of prompt. So if we look at this, we'll now just kind of take the parts that were below, and then we will just kind of, we could flip those. Let me just not have that selected. So we could just kind of take these different parts, and we could set kind of the center point for where we want those particular notes to be flipped. So just like that. So if you want to do kind of a mirror function with a logical editor, that's an easy way to do it. All right. We also had a question, as I said, I would look at for on Tuesday's live stream about sampler track preset locations. So let's say I will render this as an audio file. Okay, so I'm going to now come over here, and we'll take our sampler control, and I'm going to drag in the MIDI part. So, all right, so I'm just going to call this, we're going to save this as a preset. So we save it as a track preset, and we'll call it January 13th. Okay, so now when we want to actually see this, if we wanted to drag out that particular sampler track, what we could do is just come over, and we'll go home, and then we could see, we'll go to our user presets, and we will go to our track presets, and then we'll see our sampler, and we'll see our January 13th, 2023 that we just created. So if I drag that out, we can make a new sampler track. All right, now where does this actually go? So if we want to go into your user settings data folder, which I showed earlier, or if you're on Mac OS, we could come over to your Finder, and let's go to the library. And as we come over here, we will see application data folder. And then you want to choose. All right, so this is all in our application support folder. And it's application data folder on Windows. And then you'll go to Steinberg, and then you'll see track presets, and go to sampler, and then you'll see the January 3rd, 2023 preset. So that's where the preset lives, directly there. And we can see this is the one that we made on Tuesday's live stream. Okay, so we had a question. How to see a layered frequency graph of 2 tracks in with MS info. All right, so let's take a look at this. So let me just find this. Okay, so let's say we have, and on this I'm going to have like 2 different test tone generators. So one of them will be just a sine wave, and one will be, and I'll just turn this down so as to be less annoying, and the other track will be kind of white noise. So we have test tone, like a 40, I think it's 440, and this. All right, so if we have both of these on, I'll just turn my control room down not to annoy everyone. So let's come over here to supervision. And I have this loaded just as a master section insert. So when I come over, we can see in supervision now that this is our test tone. So we see it at 440 hertz. We can see that. And now when we mute that, let's go to our white noise. So we see that kind of evenly spread. Now, if I wanted to kind of impose these two, so now if we have both of them playing, I could see like a little bump, but they're not really separated. So if I wanted to compare different frequency ranges on different tracks, so what we could do is we could activate a sidechain mode. So we're going to just come over here, and I'm going to send a sidechain to this track. So we click on the sidechain, and we say, audio 1, which is our 1K or our 440 sine wave. We're going to sidechain that, and I'm going to activate sidechaining. So now once we do this, we still see it kind of combined. But what we could do is go to the stereo bus main. And now we could say, okay, I want to see the, so as soon as we come over here, let's say we'll take this and we'll go to our stereo bus main, and we'll say main and mix side chain. So here we can say, I want to see what the mid part, just the middle part of the panning spectrum is for that, or what the side chain is on that. So if we wanted to come over here, so we could see the 2 different tracks kind of represented and overlaid with each other. So if you wanted to just see, both the stereo MS channels, so we could just say, okay, I want to see, so as we just kind of come right over here, so that if we want to see, or if we want to see both the main and side chain together, we could just say, let's do the stereo bus main and side chain. So we could have kind of 2 different tracks where we could see, if we wanted to do comparison of a reference track to another track. So again, just simply come over and activate the sidechain. And this way we could have two different sources feeding. And then we could compare and see the different spectral characteristics. And this is using the spectrum curve. So if I want to see what the left channel looks like, I want to see what the right channel looks like in them, or we wanted to see what the middle part, or again the sides, we can just simply kind of come right over there and pick and use and actually do kind of comparison between different frequencies so that we could have a reference between two different parts within the Supervision plugin. So again, instead of just choosing like our mix down main or our stereo bus, come over here and activate the metering point to be main and stereo plus sidechain, and then you could just have that fed directly in to compare different frequencies and different parts together. Okay, so we had a question sent from Jan. So it is when importing a live session recording into Cubase for adding some Midi events or other stuff, has a tempo track made grid warp unnecessary, or when do I have to use grid warp? Can Greg show when changing the tempo track is not enough to solve the task? So a lot of times, what I will think of this as, let's say I think I may have this where you could show. So, we could think of it as, if I'm understanding correctly, that we could have different ways of kind of populating the tempo track. So one of the elements that we could do is, like, let's say I did a tempo detection of this particular file. So we have now we could use the tempo warp tool to automatically, we could manually add these points in. We could use the grid, like the warp grid, to come over here and, adjust. I'll just move this track, let's say, to the top here. And if we wanted this, to manually adjust the grid. So at times, you may do a automatic tempo detection. And when you go to the tempo track, you may say, okay, like this drum fill, threw it off. So you may come over here and just kind of tweak different elements of the warp grid to refine it. You can so sometimes you may find that, the automatic tempo detection will do 98% of it. And you say, oh, it's just slightly off right here. I just want to tweak that. And, the group kind of just slowed down. They did a rubato and it wasn't caught. So you could kind of tweak those particular settings. So, you could do it manually. You could have Cubase do the tempo detection and then refine it with the warp grid tool. So, I think it makes sense to kind of use both. And sometimes, when we introduce features over years, it's like to do tempo mapping, we used to have to kind of play in a Midi thing, and then we could straighten up tempo to make a tempo map. And then we added the ability to kind of do a tap tempo from Midi and do it as part of merge tempo from tapping. And then we added the warping features where you could manually do it, and then we added automatic tempo detection several versions later for audio, then tempo detection for Midi. So we can't necessarily, as we implement new features, take away the pre-existing workflows that people have come to rely on. So sometimes, you may use a combination of different tools to accomplish the task. So I don't think that it is making a change in the tempo editor doesn't necessarily make the warp grid unusable or not as useful. I think that you could use it for refining to kind of get the particular where exactly you want to be with your tempo detection and tempo editing functions. All right. So we see question. Hi, Greg. You're the best. Thanks. I note that you have in control room several mixdown presets. How do they work? Can they give you the setup option into the mixdown window? I'd be grateful if you could discuss the control room presets. So it says CR presets. I assume it's control room. So let's say I have this track. Now, what we could do often for this is like, especially, for like many people still listen to music mono on an iPad or phone is pretty typical. So let's say we want to make sure that our mix is translating down. So when we see our down mix presets, I think that this is what it's kind of referring to. So if I come here, we can make sure that our mono down mix is working. And this could also expose like phase problems. Now, as we get into working more with like, Dolby Atmos and stuff like that, there's a lot of people that, aren't fortunate to be in a position to have, 12 speakers, like a 7.14 setup. So often, there's a lot of people that will be mixing binaurally on headphones. So to be able to get a sense of what's going on in a, more of a 360 degree spherical audio environment, and be able to make sure that if someone doesn't have Dolby Atmos, that your tracks are going to mix down to stereo or to mono or to 5.1 to 7.14, that you could go back and forth. So the mix down presets will allow you to monitor in those different monitoring environments, using solely the functions that come in Cubase. But if you're doing primarily like music that's going to be streaming, make sure that it's going to work in mono and stereo. I have friends that will mix, almost entirely in mono until like, the last 5% of the mix. And they get it sounding great mono, then they kind of stereoize it up a little bit. And then they find that that's a great kind of technique for working through. All right, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. Thanks always for giving us your best answers. I have some projects that the recorded audio starts too close in time to 0. How do I fix this? And also, I want to create 2 pre-roll bars, let's say -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and then I want the first bar of the song that matches the first bar in Cubase. Thanks, Liz. All right, so let's say we want to do like some offsets. All right, so go back to this project. Let's say everything we're doing is starting at measure 1. Okay, so let's come over here. Okay, so right now everything is at measure 1, and I'll open up, let's say, our big screen time display, and I'll switch this. So we're at 0, 0, measure 1. Now, if I wanted to do like an offset, so I could have kind of a pre-roll space. Sometimes people would do this in old school MIDI setup, so program changes, and if you were loading up samples that weren't so fast, loading off of floppy disks and stuff like that, if you had a program change, all that fun stuff. So if you go to your project setup, and you can do that by going to your project setup, or hitting shift plus the letter S, like setup. So we'll see display bar offset. So I'll say let's do 3 bars. And at this point, We'll ask, you have modified the bar offset. Do you want to keep the project content at its bar positions? We'll say yes. And so now what we have is a -2, a -1, a 0, and then we could start at our project at measure 1. So try going to project setup, project to project setup, and you'll see display bar offset, and you can set this to a positive value. Now, if we set it to a negative value, we'll come over here, and now everything will start at measure 4. So once again, just come over here and adjust the display offset like that. And we could add pre-roll, give you space before if you need to add different tracks. All right, I think this question was from John Costigan. I wrote a drum sequence using Forget to Pass on one Groove Agent, not Groove Agent SE instrument. I was happy with the track, pressed Midi dissolve part, Cubase 12.052, when 10 generated the desired list of individual drum tracks with the instrument name and note number, which was cool. Somehow, I also populated the VSTI list with an instance of Groove Agent for each and every instrument note name, maybe 20 total. 2 insert effects I had on instrument track were also duplicated for every new one. How do I accomplish the good parts of the process without the massive duplication of Groove Agent instances? All right, so let me just go back to my other project that I prepared for today. So this could depend on if you're starting the process with a MIDI part or an instrument part. So if you do an instrument part, it's going to generate new instruments. So what you could do, and we'll show it here. All right, so I have some. All right, so I have 2 identical parts in Groove Agent. So when we come over here, we'll just say, okay, we're going to have an instrument track. Let me just. So this is an instrument track. So now when I come over here and I select the part, and let's go look at our VST instruments here. So we'll see, okay, we have a few instruments. We're okay, so let's say now I go to MIDI to dissolve part, and we'll say, okay, we're separate pitches. So as we do this, it's going to load up a whole slew of Groove Agents, because that way it's going to know to kind of play back, and it gives you that option of having those instruments that will reproduce it. But let's say if we undo that, I'm going to take this same part and I'm going to just add, if we add a VST rack, so say we go to our VSTI and we go to rack and let's add a Groove Agent. It'll ask us if we want to create a MIDI track for that plugin, which is what I did. And I copied this event down from this track to the newly created MIDI track when adding as a VST rack. So now I select a MIDI part, and since the MIDI part doesn't really know where the destination is, it'll kind of keep it the same. So let's select the MIDI event and go to MIDI to dissolve part and separate the pitches. And now all of these will be spread out, but it's still going to the same single instance of Groove Agent. So it maintains the same routing for the output here. So you could add a MIDI track that's routed to Groove Agent and then move the part down and then dissolve, and then all of your parts, you get all the good parts without any of the consequences. So give that a try. So make a MIDI part that's routed to the Groove Agent, and then at that point from the MIDI event, do a dissolve part there. And I think that will solve your problem for you, John. And we see he's been working on a song. He says the song contains about 8 things that I've coached him on. He's thrilled at the way it's turning out. So thanks for letting me know, and please send a copy so I could listen to it when you're done. And thanks for reaching out and being such a loyal Club Cubase attendee. All right. So you see a question. I have a question which I would like to kindly ask in tomorrow's live event on YouTube. Isn't it possible to switch several parameters at the same time from scaled to pickup mode? And this is in a MIDI remote, I think. And in this context, is it possible anyhow to set the default value to pickup mode instead of scaled? I thank you in advance for your kind answers. All right, so let's look at our MIDI remote editor. So let's say I have my MIDI remote editor here. So I'm going to go to my mapping assistant. So we could open this up. So we have, so I'm going to look at this. So what I'm going to do is, so we could see that we could switch these from scale to pickup. And I don't think there's a way of setting a default value, but if you hold down, select the top one here from the MIDI mapping assistant, hold down the shift key and select the bottom, that you could now switch all of them from scale to pickup. So if you just wanted to come here, select all the values, and then you could just change multiple parameters at once. So just hold down the shift key, select all, and then you could do just a multi-selection for that particular one, just like that. So, but I don't know of a way to automatically go to one, but you may not have to do it if you could select them all and change them in one easy motion like that. All right. There's another question mailed in. I have a question about the label field properties. When you make a MIDI remote and set all the buttons the way you want, is it possible to put your own text when you use samples? The name of the sample is named, for example. When you set buttons on sends and select everything and drag down, there is no text. Is it possible to place your own text so that you know which buttons are where? I've sent a PDF file for you to know what I mean. So I don't know of a way to put your own text, but let's say if we're here, and as we would, let me just jump back to, so like if let's say I put my text label, so we could see kind of our focus quick controls here. And let's say if we go to the mapping assistant, and instead of this being the focused quick controls, so let's say I want this to do like send one level. So I'm going to go to selected track and let's go to send slot one level. All right. And we'll apply the mapping. So we can see right here that it is labeled as sends one. So, so as soon as so if I come here and adjust this to sends two, and we add the label that it is, labeled here for the send. So, but I don't know of a way to, put the particular user name on it. But you can do that. So I was thinking, I don't know if we could make like an object here that would, like if there's another object we could put underneath of it, that would just kind of be a name, but but the names are carried over how you want, but it's not going to be kind of user generated. I'll keep playing with it and see if I could find something, but I don't know of a way to do that currently. All right, let me jump back to live questions. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. All right, just trying to find my spot where I was. All right, just finding my spot. All right, so you see from Sable Winters, I think this is with having the overlapping parts. Maybe, so she says, yes, Greg, so in other words, I screwed something up. So it's really, you could probably, if it's playing something wrong, just click in the bottom center, and then you could select and switch between different parts. So I think you're going to be okay, Sable. And that's the same way with audio or MIDI or instrument tracks. All right, so we see from Gareth, Greg, how do you change the key of the scale for the chord pads? All right, so let's say we have, let's say this is one key here. So let's say we're in C major. Okay, so I want it to, so I'm not sure if it's going to be physically a different key, but let me just come over here. Okay, excuse me while I have my brain cramp. All right. Okay, let's go here, and let's go to pad layout. So let's say we wanted to do 2 octaves, and let's say our start note is C. So now when I go to chord pads, we could say, okay, so let's say on this, I want it to be D major, E minor, etc. So you could just kind of map out different keys on different octaves. And if you really want it to go crazy, you can go to the pad layout, switch it from keyboard to grid. And if you wanted to have 64 different chord pads, you could do that. And each one of these could be different keys, or you have multiple keys within different banks of your chord pads as well. So you could easily just add more keyboards, more pads or keys to work with, and then you could have different keys on different octaves if you wanted to. All right, so we see from Cubase X, so I'm in my Steinberg account, don't see any activation codes under software. Spectral Layers is still on Pro 8, so I'm a bit lost. So, check to make sure also sometimes when the emails come with the code that, that they might end up in your junk email box. I don't have access to the systems for that. It's handled by Steinberg in Germany, but if you still have problems, feel free to email me, and I could forward. And you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I'd be happy to kind of pass it along to the team if you still haven't heard back. So. All right, so we see a question from Hugo. How do I remove a plugin from my list? All right, so you could just come over here and go to your studio menu to VST Plugin Manager. So we can see kind of all of your different effects that you could have here. We could create a new collection. And I think if you just kind of right click here, you could... So let's say I want to come here, and then you could delete it from the list here, I think, just by right-clicking. You could also just make, you could say, okay, I want to copy my current plugin collection. So let's say I'm default, and I want to copy, click on the plus sign, copy the current plugin settings. We'll call it Hugo. And now I can say, oh, okay, I don't want this EQ, so I'm just going to delete that particular EQ. So every time I come over here, I could have a preset. So we could just, at this point, come over, and when I go to my default, I could have all of my plugins. And if I wanted to have my plugin collection not showing particular plugins, we could do that as well. So click on the plus sign. Again, you go to Studio, to VST Plugin Manager, and then you could organize your plugins, and you can put them into new folders, categorize them by, you can categorize by, manufacturer or plugin type. So all sorts of great stuff you could do with that. All right, so we see a question. For some reason, when I updated Backbone to 1.5, Cubase blocklisted it. I tried to reactivate, but it's not working. Any workaround? So make sure, because Backbone was one of the plugins that kind of transitioned from the eLicenser to the new, to the new Steinberg licensing. So if you go to your My Steinberg account, you could see which products are eLicenser based for you and which are the Steinberg Activation Manager or the Steinberg License Management. So make sure that you have it on the Steinberg License Management, so you can see that in your My Steinberg account. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way if I change one MIDI event on a track, it will apply to all the events on the same track? So yeah, we do this with kind of shared copies. All right, so let me just jump back to another project here to show you. We showed it just a little while ago, but all right, so let's say we have our MIDI event here, and I think if I hold down Alt plus Shift and drag, so we hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, we can make copies. So, and if I wanted to just come to the edge here and hold Shift, so that will make what's called a shared copy. And we can see the shared copy just by this little almost equal sign or two horizontal lines. So if I wanted to make changes on some of these particular files here, so I wanted to move these notes up and down, we would see that applied, and that change applied to all of the shared projects without having to go in and select and do that same edit to all of the files. So we'll make it just a little larger here so that we could see that. So let's, so change it one, it will change in all of the other parts for you just that easily. So if you want to, again, just kind of copy, hold down the Shift key. If you go to the right edge, that will make a shared copy for you. All right, so question, how to move past perfectionist completion paralysis and call it finished. Yeah, completion anxiety is a tough thing, and especially with computers because everything can be perfect. And I remember, and I wish we could have got this in, we did our Hans Zimmer Spotlight video, but one of the questions I asked him was like, how do you know when you're done with a piece? And he just kind of burst out laughing, and he was just like, I'm done when the director comes and is banging on my door and says, give me my music. Otherwise you could just go on forever. So sometimes I think, think of, okay, you're just going to only work on it give yourself a deadline. Everyone needs a deadline to complete something. So, I think without deadlines, composers would never finish because they could just keep adding and keep tweaking. But at a certain point, you just have to give yourself a deadline and say, beyond this, it's done. And I have many friends that are famous recording artists and mixers and producers, and they won't listen to their stuff because they know that if they gave it a little more time, they would have changed it. And so they purposely won't listen to it, knowing that it's like, man, I could have fixed that guitar note. I could have done this. And, I remember, like a great story. I remember Elliot Shiner telling me he was doing a 5.1 mix of Bohemian Rhapsody for Queen for when he did Night at the Opera, and he did it in Nuendo. And Elliot does like an amazing job. But, as they had all the tracks in Nuendo, they're doing editing and doing all the mix, Brian May came up to him and he's like, yeah, this one guitar note at the very end of the song on one of the little guitar notes is slightly out of tune. He's like, is it possible to fix that note? It's been driving me crazy ever since the song is released, but they had to get it done. So, even the top people, so Brian May will go back and he still wanted to correct one note from, probably 27 years earlier for a project just because, he had the opportunity to do it, but it bothered him ever since then. So just give yourself a deadline. That's the best thing you could do. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we have Lord Schrader just saying thanks and hello to the Cubase family. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Fernando Gallegos on. So thanks for joining us. It's always great to see so many people on. We see a comment from Jay Hatchie. Hi, Greg. Why do we need a manual or AI when you have you? So maybe I am just an AI bot, and I'm just impersonating Greg Undo. So who knows? Just kidding. Anyway. Sorry to read of Michael Teams having computer problems. It's always a bummer. All right, so we have a question from Sable Winters. What feature or add-on is employed to do real-time collaboration in Cubase 12 Pro? So it's probably going to be the VST Connect Pro. So if you go to VST Cloud, and then you go to VST Connect Pro, and then that would allow you to, someone could download a VST Connect Performer, and then you could record them directly into your Cubase project. So that's the VST Connect Pro is a great way to do it. Right, so we see from John Costigan, says, thank you, Greg, that fixes his problem immediately. So that's great. It's pretty easy to do once you know what's going on. All right, we see Nick has to take off. He has an early morning, so thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question from Lauren McDonald. Is this going to be available to watch later? Yeah, so all the live streams are available to watch. So I think we're probably done like almost 270 since COVID started. But if you go to youtube.com/Cubase and then click on, you'll see like the live tab kind of on the main page. Just click on live and all the live streams will show up here. So yeah, they're all indexed, and you could, if you go to cubaseindex.com, you could search there, but there's basically, all of them are indexed and available to watch after the fact. So, and people go back and watch live streams from 3 years ago all the time. I like Chris Hallam's new band name, A Whole Slew of Groove Agents. So, sounds good. Sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Yeah, for Chris Hallam, I will give up the band the dibs on the band name. So since he brought it up. All right, so we see DL White. So question, I mapped my M Audio Oxygen to be a controller for faders and transport, but when I loaded a virtual instrument, it stopped controlling and switched to piano keys only. Please advise. Okay, so when we go to like a MIDI remote, so let's say I have my MIDI remote device here, one of the things that you could do is there is kind of a quick area control focus setup. So if you have it set for focus quick controls, so let's say I'm here and I have these set up for my focus quick controls. So we open up our instrument. I'll just show it with I'll just add an instrument here. Okay, so I see I have my focus quick controls that are set up here. So what we could do, so I move these knobs. Now, we could lock the focus on, so let's say I'm doing it with my Choice Os controller here. So let's say I'm on an audio track. Okay, we could come over to our quick controls. And let's say I have this set to my volume. So now my audio track is selected, and I'm controlling the volume. Now we could lock this to control only the volume regardless of what is visible. So if I come here and we open up our Hallian Sonic SE, that now it's not controlling this, but we could come over here and switch the settings. So we could say, I want it to be a track focus only, or I want it to be plug-in window focus, or track and plug-in window. So now I have my track selected. It's controlling my track. I select a plug-in, and now it's going to control the particular plug-in for me. So make sure that the focus here is set correctly and that you have it set for track and plug-in window focus. So you may have to with the focus quick control, if you select and make this the active window, that will be controlled. Or if you wanted to go to the track, you could just come over here and say, now we're going to do, our track. We could just have it only do quick controls on our track. So whatever we have selected, so just make sure that you have the focus right and that you have the particular, plugin actually set and is the focused element. So we see the question, can I use a MIDI keyboard as a controller and a keyboard? So certainly. So, but realize that, some things, like if you wanted to, if it's kind of allocated to the remote control functions, that, those functions will be allocated, but you don't necessarily, if you haven't mapped the keys to particular functions, those would pass the MIDI to other devices. All right, so we see Lauren had to take off. Thanks for joining us today. All right, wonderful to see Best Korean Jesus on. Happy New Year. I think it's the first time you've been on live or first time you made a comment this year, so great to see you back. All right, so you see from Gareth, he's talking about the E2, F2 changes the key, but you have to do it for each chord pad individually. No other way to do it permanently. So yeah, I think, yeah, so that's the case, but you could have, again, have multiple octaves or multiple pad setups up to 64 chords. Okay. All right, so we see 2 octaves, chord pad, great, but only 1 octave still triggers and is blue. How to assign the second octave is 1 key. All right, so let me give it a try here. Okay, so I'll go to my chord pads and let's add 2 octaves. Okay, so let me assign some chords here. All right. Okay, so now I think if we come over to, let's get to our settings. And we'll say our latch chords are C1 to B1. So let's change this. Let me just see if I can. All right, so now if I go down an octave, so now I could just kind of trigger this. So try changing the pads range. So try changing that, and I may have this set somewhere else. So yeah, just try changing the pads range here, and you should be able to access more chords. Okay, so we see I did reinstall Windows 10 and lost my Midi remote control settings for Nano Control 2. I have the image backup of the previous Windows installation, so I could grab the files needed, but don't know which file. So if you come over here, we can say, let's go to, let's say our Nano, let's jump back here. All right, let's take it at this level. Let's go to the settings. And then if you go to scripts, so you can see the script path here. So kind of look directly in this location here. So once again, go to your script area, click on the settings here. Then you could choose your scripts, click on the scripts tab, and then you should see the file path here. And you could expose it there. So that's where you could look for your Midi remote script. All right. All right, just reading through. All right, so we see Sable appreciated advice on completion paralysis. You know, I heard Stevie Wonder's, one of the guys who works with him, called it completion anxiety. You know, sometimes it's hard competing against your old catalog that is so highly loved and revered. So, all right, so we see Gareth is starting dinner. All right, he wants everyone to smash the like button. Thanks for joining us. Hope you have a great weekend. So we see Gareth asks, is there a preset available for the Nectar Impact series? You know, so they are really pretty easy to make. I mean, you could probably make one in 5 or 10 minutes to do, but I think that there are some Nectar ones. There is I think Jazz Dude's always really good at posting a particular, there is like a shared page where people upload their particular MIDI remote scripts, and you can look in there. Yeah, and Jazz Dude did that, so thank you for that, Jazz Dude. All right, so we see Cephas says, just joined, what's happening here? So this is our Club Cubase live stream, so you ask a question on Steinberg products, and kind of like a real-time Q&A session, and we hopefully answer questions for you. So thanks for being here and joining us. See, Valley says, once again, I'm always stunned to see what Cubase is capable of. All right, so we see from Jay Hatchie, we're rolling MC303 and Innovation 0 SL2 MIDI controller. I also had the device panel for the 303. Can all that be mapped out now without using the MIDI remote, without doing it manually? So let's see which novations are included. So I don't think the MC303 is mapped. It may be, but just because it has a device panel that is controlling the internal parameters of it, but not necessarily transmitting those parameters out to control different elements in Cubase. And that's kind of what the MIDI remote does. But there are a number of Novation scripts that are available. So let's see if we could, if we go to scripts, so let me just check again here quickly. Novation 0 SL2. So it looks like maybe yeah, so it looks like these are some of the, I think these are the Novation ones, launch key. But you could always reach out to Novation and see if they have created those, or look on the site that Jazdu just linked. All right. Michael Pierce is just, you don't have to apologize for being late if you're busy working in Cubase, so we'll let you slide. All right, so I think I'm at the end of questions. We'll see if there's more questions that pop up. I think I got to the end of the questions. We'll see. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. Hope that everyone has a wonderful weekend. And again, we do these live streams on Tuesdays and Fridays, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And you could send questions in advance. If you have a more detailed question, you could send them in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. We'll see. There's usually about a 30-second delay from when I talk to when it's actually on the stream. So we'll see if there's any other questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up early. Thanks, everyone, for the wonderful questions. If you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and let other people know about the live streams. It's always a joy for me to be able to help people realize their creativity. So. All right, let's see if it's any more questions kind of come up or come in. Okay, so we see question Media Bay. I have lots of empty doubles, but don't have any sound because the original got zipped. Is it still taking a lot of room when searching for samples? So probably if the zipped files aren't going to show in Media Bay, because it's one of it just kind of looks for WAV, AIF, project files, Midi files, presets, track presets. So, if it's a zipped file, it's not going to show up inside of Media Bay. So it may still be taking room on your hard disk, but it's not necessarily being read by Media Bay. All right, so Peter just says, I had a question about routing in a control room. We'll save it for next time. So feel free to ask it. Be happy to answer it today if you want. So that way you could utilize the feature hopefully over the weekend. I'll wait a little bit, see if Peter's question comes in. Let's see, I think Sable says I missed her last question. Let me see if I could find it. All right. Okay. So I see your question, Sable. Thanks for pointing out. I've had this problem for a while now in the Media Bay tab or Media Bay non-Cubase instruments listed but disappear in categories, contact, scalar, vital, not listed in media. Why? So probably because those plugins don't utilize standard VST3 presets. So that, and there's kind of a whole preset organization system so that different programs could read it as part of the VST3 specification. So probably I'm pretty sure Contact doesn't use that. I don't use Scalar 2 or Vital, but it's probably because they don't utilize the VST preset system. All right, so we see, can MIDI remote read preset names from hardware devices? So it's not intended to extract the patch names out. The MIDI remote is to take your MIDI controller and control different aspects of the program. If you want to incorporate patch scripts for hardware keyboards, if you come over to your studio menu. And let's go to more options. And then if you go to your MIDI device manager, here's where you could just say, okay, I want to install a device, and you can see different patch scripts. So you can say, okay, I want to have my, venerable Alesis D4. So now I assign this to a particular output. So we'll say, okay, that's my output. So now when I go to add a MIDI track, we could say, okay, this MIDI track, I want to send it out to my D4. See if I saved it right. So we saved my D4, and now I could see all my... So let me just set that correctly here. So we will say studio, more options, MIDI device manager. All right, so we'll say that's where my D4 is connected. All right, so we say D4, and now I could just click here and see all the patches. So, but again, we can think of the MIDI remote as being able to control different aspects in Cubase intelligently, but not necessarily extracting patches. But there's provisions in Cubase with the MIDI device manager to do that already, Jay. Okay. All right, so we see want to set up headphone for this Peter's question. So you think we could do this? Okay, we want to set up headphone cues from within a control room. Would like to route them through my digital mixer's interface. So I might distribute those cues to various feeds on my headphone amp. This is normally done via aux sends on my digital mixer. If this is beyond the scope of the Hangout, we can save it for another day. So really all you have to do is like on the Cubase setup is when you go to the control room, let's say we have our cues. Once we go to your audio connections and we say, okay, we have, let's say, our vocals, guitars, and bass, our cue mixes, we're going to send these out to a connection that is, maybe over ADAT light pipe, from the computer's audio interface, either analog or digital into the mixer. So now when we send something to headphone mix, let's say if we're here and I wanted to send this to, so say I want to send this track out. So when we go to our cue sends, I send this track out to the vocals. It's going to go out to the vocal cue mix that is going out of, let's say, output 3 and 4 of your audio interface that's defined in your audio connections. Now that is being sent out into your mixer, you could distribute it in the mixer via an aux send to your headphone distribution systems. So, once it's set here, that signal gets sent to the outputs defined by the cue mixes in the control room, and then you'd have to do the routing probably the same way that you would do in your digital mixer. All right. All right, we'll see if there's any other. I see I'm honored to be Jazz Dude's Mr. Miyagi. Wax on right hand, wax off left hand. Wax on, wax off. All right, we'll see if there's more questions that kind of come in. If not, we'll wrap up. I want everyone to have a wonderful weekend, and please stay safe and healthy. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and end just a couple minutes early. So thanks for a wonderful live stream. Thanks for all the great questions. Hope that everyone's learned something new. And everyone go utilize their Cubase better over the weekend. And we will see everyone back on Tuesday. Thank you very much. Goodbye.